When we talk about, like, the changing rooms debate is a perfect example of this. The conversation around...
Why should I, as a female, be forced to get changed in front of a male?
Okay, so I had to clip this one because I genuinely don't think I've seen a question dodged this many times in a row on live television. This is from GB News, and the setup is simple. A panel is talking about trans rights, the media, and how the conversation gets framed. And at first it's pretty standard stuff, people talking past each other a bit, the usual back and forth. But then it gets to the changing rooms topic, and that's where this whole thing just falls apart. One woman asks a very direct, very simple question. And what follows is one of the most uncomfortable stretches of dodging I've watched in a long time. Just wait for it.
Well, no, I can't really say I agree with any of that. What I would say, though, if we want to talk about, I don't know about the lack of British identity or whatever, but what I do think creates a hostile environment for trans people, and why so many younger people particularly may suffer with gender dysphoria, is because of the climate of which they live in, where you have political, media and public figures demonizing them. I think the conversation very often about trans people descends immediately into the gutter and removes the dignity and justice that these people deserve. Just like us, trans people want and deserve housing, education, jobs, opportunities, but so often are they derided in debates as being deviant, as being wrong in some way and not supported. I think the number...
Well, hang on, some of these fellas that go around dressed as women with their, you know, their fake bits in their bras, they are deviants, quite frankly.
I don't know who you're referring to.
Well, there's a condition, what's it called? I'm probably going to get...
Autogynephilia?
Yeah, that. Where, sorry if you've got children listening or if you're a sensitive disposition, where some men actually get sexually aroused by the thought of themselves as women in women's stuff.
Right. Well, whilst I'm sure those people do exist, I can imagine that's an extremely tiny minority. But trans people have always existed. Look, historically, back through, go back as far as ancient Greece, ancient Rome, whereas obviously there's not so much the surgical sort of changes people can have these days. Gender dysphoria has long existed. It's in, as I said, mythology. It's in Shakespeare's plays. It's through literature, through the centuries. Now we're at a point of a greater understanding and what should be a greater acceptance of trans people. And unfortunately, many, as I said, in the government and in the media haven't caught up with that time and have made this country a particularly difficult place for transgender people to exist, essentially. I mean, it's worth noting as well, in the United States and in this country, about 50% of trans people have self-harmed and a similar amount have actually attempted suicide. And I think that Charlie makes a point about mental health and trans people, but I don't at all see transgender as a mental health condition. I just think they're extremely vulnerable because of the way that society has developed a hard shell which excludes them in any conversation and removes their dignity.
What I would say, Sam, very quickly, like the climate and nature bill that we were just talking about, this narrative that you're kind of building here, that trans people are somehow uniquely beset upon by society at large, I don't think is true. Because I think if you go into any of the kind of institutions of power in our society, whether that is the government itself or the civil service or an Amazon HR department or a media company or anything else, and you listed off the opinions that you've just given, you would find almost unanimous approval. Because like the climate and nature thing, the trans thing is also an elite project. It's something that has been picked up by power and centred in the mainstream consciousness, despite the fact that this is a tiny, vanishingly small minority of people. With that being said, I agree with you that we shouldn't be deriding these people on an individual basis. I think it's in very poor taste to attack people on the basis of their trans identity. With that being said, I still sort of say that it is an expression of mental illness, because what else can it be? If you are born a male and you are biologically a male, then you can't. It's physically and spiritually impossible to become a female, right? And so in the same way that you wouldn't tell a schizophrenic that there are men in dark suits following them around and that there are bugs in their home and cameras in their walls and so on, you don't tell a male who believes he's a female that he is a female. That doesn't have that person's best interests at heart. What you're doing is you are buying into, supporting and enabling their delusion, which I think is why you see so much what you've just said about self-harm, suicide and so on. I don't think you help these people by supporting these things.
what I will say there, Charlie, is that I think that you can't on one hand say, like, you know, come out against the derision of trans people and then continue to refer to them as being mentally ill.
But that's not an insult. That's a statement of fact.
Right. What I would say to that is that, I mean, yes, trans people factually are absolutely and very often in the mainstream media derided, as we've said, as being deviant, as being...
By whom? Who are we talking about here? Because the mainstream media, I don't think say that. I think the mainstream media say the kind of things that you've been saying about how, about trans rights and so on.
I don't think you can honestly look someone in the eye, look at the headlines of the Daily Mail, the Express, the Sun, and tell me that trans people get a fair trial ever.
But what about, what about the New York Times,
we have people in the media literally making
Journal?
up hypothetical situations for which to demonise trans people with. What if someone does this? What if someone does that? And, it often comes into the conversation of protecting...
Who sits there and goes, what if someone does this?
When we talk about, like, the changing rooms debate is a perfect example of this. The conversation around...
Why should I, as a female, be forced to get changed in front of a male?
Because this is, again, the conversation about where you view gender and somebody's right to self-autonomy.
I've got no interest in how someone views their own gender. My question was, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a male?
But if we're referring to a trans woman, then that is a woman.
No, a trans woman is a biological male. So I'm asking you again, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a biological male?
Right, but if somebody has a gender,
answer
for example...
that question.
Well, nobody's making you do that, Michelle.
Yes.
Now this is the moment that grabbed everyone's attention. The question couldn't have been more direct. Why should a woman be expected to undress in front of a biological male? Instead of answering, the conversation shifted to gender identity, personal autonomy, and broader definitions. But none of those points addressed the question itself. She calmly brought the discussion right back, asking for a clear answer instead of letting the topic drift. Then came the claim that nobody's making you do that. Her response immediately changed the tone by pointing to a real NHS case already before the courts, arguing this wasn't just a theoretical debate but an issue with real-world consequences.
You do. There's cases going through the courts at the moment. I can think of one such case in the NHS where some nurses are taking action because they were forced to share a changing room with a gender-neutral changing room where there was what you call a trans woman, i.e. a biological male, using those facilities. So, yeah, it actually does happen.
Right.
So I ask you again, why should I, as a biological female, be forced to share and get undressed in front of a biological male?
Look, I will say trans men are men, trans women are women. That is my opinion, and I think that we need to respect
So we haven't answered it. So basically what you're saying is I, as a biological female, have to get changed in front of some fella because you say the label is...
That transgender people are... Do you think that trans people exist? Like... I
think that what you call a transgender woman absolutely exists. I don't think it's a figment of your imagination, but I think that they are categorically, biologically male. So therefore, they cannot and should not be able to access female-only spaces. Lots of women like me do not want to have to get dressed and all the rest of it in front of biological men. Yeah. This is not a controversial view. We have single-sex spaces for a reason. We have an epidemic of male violence against women and girls. We've fought hard to get our single-sex spaces. We deserve those single-sex spaces. Those single-sex spaces are often responsible for keeping us safe. And many of us, and there's women that will disagree with me, and I respect that, but many of us do not want biological men in our spaces, our private single-sex spaces, and nor should we have to have them there just in order to satisfy other people's descriptions.
Right, well, I suppose we're going to have to agree to disagree there, Michelle, but what
but we always have to agree to disagree, but it's not you that then has to get changed in front of a man.
Right, but
you would, because you're in that man's changing room, but you get what I mean. It's not you that has to then get naked and get changed and get undressed in front of someone of the opposite biological sex against your will. It's always us women that have to suck it up. Okay, and a lot of us, by the way, are fed up of it, quite frankly. Are you or not? Lots of you, by the way, will be fed up with the whole discussion, going, oh, what are you doing, talking about this issue again? Move on. I hear you, and I am going to move on.
Have you ever noticed how a debate can become unforgettable? Not because of the argument itself, but because of the answer that never comes. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. At the heart of this exchange wasn't simply a disagreement. People can hold different opinions. That's part of any healthy debate. What stood out was the repeated refusal to directly answer a simple question about safety and privacy. Every time the question came up, the conversation seemed to drift somewhere else. Sometimes the strongest moment in a debate isn't raising your voice. It's calmly asking the same question until everyone notices it still hasn't been answered. Whether you agreed with her position or not, one thing was hard to miss. She stayed on the same point from beginning to end, and the clear answer she was looking for never seemed to arrive. Like and subscribe for more upcoming updates.